Serious, why is your ex-best friend an ex-best friend? Because she had an affair with my husband, which I discovered when she had his baby. Invited me and my 4-year-old daughter to his home country and excitedly made plans with me for the 6 months leading up to it. I get there naturally expecting to hang out, but understanding that he has real life obligations, job, wife, etc. Long story short, we get zero time together. I was miffed but made the best of the trip just being away with my daughter. He came by where I was staying after not communicating with me all week and offered my last weekend away to go to a cabin in the mountains 4 hours away for a couple nights. I took him up on it because despite being upset about him ditching me, I was hopeful that it was just an off week for him and that we could finally hang out. I really liked the guy and assumed he thought of me as I did him, a brother. Anyway, we spent the night at the cabin after barely speaking the whole trip there. I tried several times to initiate conversation. And the next morning he promptly kicked me out, in the middle of freaking nowhere. He said he needed the time with his wife. There I was, stranded with my luggage and my daughter in a foreign country and not expecting any of this. He was so casual about it just didn't work out. I could have knocked his teeth out for that. He gaslighted me over text messages as soon as I got home and I haven't spoken to him since. He was my best and closest friend. I don't think I'll ever understand why he did that. I wish I knew. She one day just stopped talking to me and ignored all my messages. This happened to me. Abusive and controlling boyfriend and an unplanned pregnancy on her end. Reconciled but it wasn't the same. He ordered on H. Mine killed herself. Did drugs at my parents' house. Flicked cigarettes in their pool. Peed in the pool. Hit his girlfriend. Tried to fight someone twice his size. Fell on me and broke my hand. When he woke up, tried to blame me. She felt that I am not relevant to her anymore. I'm starting to think my best friend feels that way towards me now. Not the best feeling. She was dating a guy she would always fight with. She would ditch me for him and drugs. She would get mad when I wanted to spend time with my boyfriend. She would call in the middle of the night and ask me to pick her drunk butt up only to get in her car and drive home. Basically it was one-sided and all about her. She started selling oils from a pyramid scheme and drank too much Kool-Aid. She stabbed me in the back during my divorce. She had gotten fairly close to my now ex-husband. When he asked for the split, I told her I didn't want to make her choose sides. But until things were settled, I either needed her to stop talking to him or stop talking to me. Because things were going to get messy. Made clear if she chose him I'd still be her friend when all was said and done. She swore loyalty to me, raved about how much she loved me and disapproved of how he treated me. Didn't take long for me to find out she was telling him everything I discussed with her in confidence. She didn't know I found out, so I fed her a bunch of bulls to throw him off. Tried to get her to come clean by telling her how much I trusted her and couldn't imagine not having her. She continued to lie. I told her I knew what she was doing. Told her to frick off and never speak to me again. About a year later, ex-hubby told me she was trying to frick him. She was married with 2 kids at the time. Started dating the guy who sexually assaulted me. She knew what happened and how badly it affected me. He's a manipulative liar and a huge egoist. Never will speak to him again. This happened to me. Played video games with him almost every night for many years. Then, he knew this. My baby was born and I wasn't able to hang out online for a few weeks. And he took huge offense to this. Really opened my eyes. And thankfully I don't regret cutting the ties. Best friend for 5 years. But he was one of those guys that would never call you, you always called him. One day I decided that if he wanted to see me, he'd have to pick up the phone himself. It's been 15 years and not a word. I hang out with a lot of pretty introverted people. Have a certain fear that if I didn't call them, make plans, then I'd never see any of them again. I met this guy, I'm not entirely sure how anymore, TBF, when I was in my early 20s and had just dropped out of college. Now, we were both 2 huge freaking nerds. He got me into tabletop RPGs. I got him into Firefly. Due to distance we'd hang out online a lot. Most nights, we'd riff bad movies, play games, start up a few low-person tabletop runs. He'd GM and run a GMPC, I'd run 2 chars, or vice versa. We had difficulty getting a full group, so we said frick it and adapted. At first it was pretty fun. Then in about a year period I lost my job and my father died. I got real withdrawn and miserable, and he started getting pissy that I wasn't fun anymore. Our friend intervenes, and because I didn't, and still don't, to be fair, have the confidence of an earthworm, I ended up making an effort to pull myself back up and be fun again. But it had changed. Now this was real dang gradual, but less and less would we do what I wanted. Instead it had to be what he wanted. He found a new free MMO, we had to play it. All we watched and riffed were horror movies. I'm not a huge fan, but I tried to make it work. Our short tabletop games ended when he lost interest. Sometimes as soon as a session in when I was GMing. Often because he found yet another MMO he wanted to drag me into. I, for the freaking record, hate MMOs. I began to realize we had less and less in common over time. I wanted to and was trying to get a job. He was happy leeching off his grandparents and complained that I shouldn't get a job because there weren't any anyway. I'd try to mention a book or something to him, and he'd talk about how they were boring and pointless. Then somehow he gets a girlfriend. I'd gotten a job by now. He gets a girlfriend and suddenly he can't chat with anyone from 6 PM to 12 AM. He must be on voice with her. No one else can even communicate with him in text. Girlfriend. He expected, not wanted, not asked, flat out expected that I and a few others would just rearrange our schedules to be online in the day instead of the night. Jobs and sleep and such. Frick it, that's when we needed to be on. I noped the frick out. Sayonara, adios, adieu. A year later he comes back to make peace, swears he's changed, etc. We start to patch things up, start a new tabletop game with me and another friend of his, set a weekly date and everything. He misses first session, and I text him to ask if he's okay or whatever. Oh, I plan to go to my girlfriend's place for 3 weeks. I'll be back whenever. What about the game? Man, you guys can wait for me. He's the fricking Grams. I deleted his number and basically walked away. This near the end I was hanging out with him and we usually gamed together. This particular time I wasn't in the mood to game and just wanted to chill. Then he said that's not how this works. That was the first time I really knew our friendship was drawing to a close. I was best friends with, let's call him Chris, for many years. Chris was always the life of the party. Everyone loved him. Just an overall funny dude with a good head on his shoulders. But he had very low self-confidence. I was his best friend for years. We would talk every day, hang out all the time, work out together, etc. Eventually, we all went to college, and Chris and I stayed close friends. But I started hanging out a bit more with a girl, let's call her Maria. Maria was cool and friendly with Chris. All was well, until Maria started inviting her friend Ashley along. Ashley was nasty, rude, and well, evil. She treated her friends like absolute crap. I couldn't stand hanging out with her, but Chris liked her. I think it was just because she paid special attention to him, and because he had such low self-esteem. He felt that this is what he deserved, and it was the best that he could do. They eventually dated, and we all stayed in touch, until one night, they broke up, and he called me in tears. He explained that he got her a necklace. He went out of his way to pick out something that he thought that she would like, and she threw it back at him and said to return in. I thought that this was so horribly mean, so I told him, look, man, I know you think that this girl is right for you, but she's not, and you will realize that when someone better comes along and treats you like a decent human. It was thoughtful of you to do that for her, and she didn't even appreciate the thought. That's horrible. He told me I was right, thanked me, and we made plans to hang out. Then they got back together a few days later, and I literally never heard from him again. I tried to text him, call him, etc., with no reply. Every year for 3 years I would text him on his birthday and Christmas just to wish him well, but he never replied. It's sad, but I think he told Ashley about what I said, and her being completely controlling and manipulative forbade him from seeing me. My cousin just messaged me the other day that he ran into him and that his number is the same that it has always been. Also, he's married now. I always still thinking about texting him and wishing him well, but I always decide against it. I would never make him choose me over his girlfriend, and I just feel bad that he threw away years of a friendship for this very unpleasant person. He admitted to sexually assaulting a teenage girl. I ended up turning him in. You did the right thing. My possessive boyfriend made me choose between him and her, and I made the wrong decision. It's my biggest regret in life. I miss her so much. When I realized I was putting in far more effort than they were, took me a while to notice the drop off on their end. I decided to stop initiating contact to see what would happen. 2 years later, nothing. If a guy ever liked me over her, she would get him alone and make up nasty things about me to turn them off of me. It took me a few times of interested guys just ghosting me suddenly to realize what was happening. She was super jealous of any other girls getting attention and used to be a lot, so it didn't surprise me. It's annoying now to see her preach about women supporting women online though. Personally, I think it was, and still is, my fault. I was really good friends with this girl for around 4 years. We did everything together, go to the movies, dine out, chill at each other's house, the usual best buds stuff. I still don't know how, but somehow, someday, I started developing some feelings for her. Out of fear that my confession would disrupt the friendship, I decided to stay mum. Once, when we were out drinking, we were doing the regular chit chat when I just told her. She just looked at me for a moment and became silent throughout the night. I knew I'd blown it, so I decided to give her space. I temporarily ceased communication with her. After a week or so, she texted me and told me that she thought about it for a long time and that she doesn't feel the same way. The Naomi would have completely understood, but I was an egoistic butthole back then. I felt hurt, but I didn't spontaneously retaliate. I decided to let the friendship decay away. As the days went by, I gradually started decreasing contact with her. It went from one-worded text replies to complete ghosting. I felt stupid, but it was my pride at stake. After all, eventually, we ceased talking. We still don't talk to this day. I miss her like crazy, but I know I've made the friendship irreparable. Every time Wish You Were Here plays, I remember her and start crying. For people who are doing what I did, please don't. It's not worth it, trust me. She always had complaints about her other friend, but never listened to any of my advice. I also found out that she was emotionally manipulating her other friends. Okay, bye. He was a smart guy, very friendly if not a bit lonely. We were both very close as young kids, but when we started high school I fell into the normie crowd whilst he quickly made friends with the more troublesome students. He would get into trouble to amuse them, and this became a part of his personality in general over time. In fact, this happened to a lot of close friends. This basically ended the friendship after a year or two, and what I can't understand is that he is still like this, 10 years after high school. Come on Ed, time to grow up. I hate conflict, especially with loved ones. I always try to avoid escalating a dispute in any way I can, even if that means putting someone else's wants before mine. I was upset with this person over how their uninvited friends crashed and treated me at my own birthday party. I spent the night crying in a corner of the place. As respectfully as I could, I raised this issue to said best friend a couple of days later and they completely exploded on me. Their insults ranged from how ungrateful I was to them to what a horrible friend I am. As a bonus, they even told me that me learning how to speak up for myself shouldn't be tested out on them because I have plenty more fake friends to call out. I cut contact after that without looking back, and the weight off my shoulders is much lighter. Was best friends with a girl for many years. It was basically a sappy girls' night movie type thing. We shared clothes, had sleepovers, got ready for parties together, texted all the time. People thought we were sisters. Also, this is into our late 20s, not grade school. I was dating a guy that I was absolutely nuts about. Long story short, he went from amazing and charming to condescending and mean. I was absolutely heartbroken about it and confided in my best friend. Of course, I detailed to her all the reasons why it didn't work out, and she watched sad movies and ate ice cream with me. Suddenly best friend was less and less available. I'd ask what she was up to and get weird strained answers. I asked her on several occasions if she was seeing my ex. She'd expressed an interest before we dated, and she said no. This goes on for several weeks until I get a pocket dial from her on my voicemail. It's literally her flirting with my ex and talking about all the reasons we broke up and why that's not a problem for her. I texted her to ask what she was up to. She lied. So I made an audio file of the voicemail to send to her and never heard from her again. That's cold as frick. I started realizing how often she was lying about things. Even little things that I couldn't understand why she would even bother lying about them. After I was aware of the compulsive lying, I just couldn't trust anything she ever said and I started to disconnect. She died of a heart attack in her sleep, but she will always be my best friend. I'm sorry to hear that. I met him the first day of school when I didn't know anybody, so I made friends with the random guy sitting next to me. It was a big mistake. He was kind of annoying, but he was funny at times, so I stuck around. Thing is, I now realize that he was manipulative as heck. He would tell me all sorts of BS about other students, making them seem like enemies or something. He would actively try to stop me when fooling around and hanging with other people by saying that they were laughing at me, not with me, or that they did drugs or whatever. He lived in another nearby town. His parents always ignored him and usually just dumped him over by my house most afternoons, even when I just wanted some peace and quiet. School started at 8 o'clock, but his parents would drop him at school an hour early for some reason. Since he'd get bored, and he knew I lived just 10 minutes away from school, he'd show up and start ringing the doorbell at 7:10 when I was just waking up and most of my family was still asleep. I would often eat my breakfast while he stood around, awkwardly staring and moving around. My parents got sick of him waking us up by ringing the doorbell and gave him keys. This was a bad idea, as you'll soon see. He liked rooting through closets and drawers at my house, not just in my room, but in everyone's rooms. He'd pull out random objects and ask, "What's this? What does this do?" He'd invite friends to my house, if that makes any sense, and then he'd give them the tour of the house. He often complained about how I had a pool in my house but never used it. I'm hydrophobic. I can't really swim, but he would still insist, to the point of throwing me in the pool fully clothed at one point. Heck, and if that was bad, here comes the moment where we split apart forever. One summer, while me and my family were visiting my grandparents in the USA, he used his keys to get into my house and threw a party. It was mostly his sister's friends, since he barely had any of his own, but he still did it. And worst of all, when our cleaning lady saw the mess, he denied everything. He said he only went to the house, alone, because he had fallen and hit his testicles. He later admitted his sister was also present. When we gave him proof of the party, like the neighbors' complaints, he admitted it, but said it was just a few people, and they only stayed in the patio and pool area. When I found an Instagram pic of two girls, who I didn't know, hooking up in my bed, he only slightly altered his story. I've since blocked him on every social media ever. He changed schools soon, so I never had to deal with him again. I heard from a guy I know that he was now in the Carney gang, the group that he had insulted the most in the past. I happened to see him again just by chance, 2 years later. He claimed that he had changed, but he still wouldn't admit what happened at the party. Why are your parents giving house key to this kid? You have been visited by the ingenious Joe. Comment brain so you always see the glass half full. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.